Hey everyone, Andy here. I had a bunch of questions lately about doing rollovers from either employer plans like a 401k to an IRA and what the tax reporting is around it. Specifically, will you get a 1099-R showing the money that's getting rolled? And if you do, what do you have to do with it? Does it even go in your tax return at all? The answer is it depends, and it depends on a few things. I'm going to break it down this way. It depends on if the rollover is coming from an IRA to an IRA, or if it's coming from an employer plan like 401k, 403b, 457 thrift savings plan to an IRA. It further also depends if that rollover is what's called a direct or an indirect rollover. So let's start, and you'll see what I mean as we get into it. So first, let's assume you're doing a rollover from an IRA to another IRA. A direct rollover would be where the custodian, where the IRA currently is, directly sends the money or the funds to the other IRA custodian. The money is not distributed to you. It is not made payable to you. You don't even take possession of it. Whether it's done through a wire, through a transfer process known as ACATS, which is most commonly how these are done. ACATS is a standard sort of brokerage pipes and plumbing for how accounts are transferred electronically. Or maybe if they do send a check, that could still be direct, so long as the check is made out to the custodian of the IRA. It's not made out to you personally. Even if they mail that check to you, the point is the check isn't made out to you, it's made out to your IRA. So you take that check, you turn around, you deposit it, you mail it into your new IRA. That's a direct IRA rollover. In that case, no, you do not get any 1099-R showing any such distribution. The money just kind of magically goes from one IRA to the other, and that's it. There's no tax reporting around it. Second outcome is if it's an indirect IRA rollover. So again, you're taking money from one IRA, moving, transferring, rolling it, whatever you want to call it, to another IRA, but the mechanics of how it's transferred is different. In an indirect rollover, the money is sent to you, made out to you, distributed to you. You individually, you get it personally. You get that money out of that IRA. Now it's up to you to turn around. You technically have 60 days to do it. If in 60 days you turn around, take that money, redeposit it into your other IRA, then ultimately you will have rolled it over, but it's called indirect because you take possession of it first as opposed to the money going directly from trustee to trustee or custodian to custodian. You will get a 1099-R for this because that distribution you took, that first step of it looks and feels and is a normal distribution. So you're going to get a 1099-R showing the amount of the money distributed from your old IRA to you, and then it's going to be a little clunky in your tax return. You're going to have to report that, no, this wasn't actually a distribution. I ultimately turned around, I recontributed or I rolled it into my other IRA. Therefore, this wasn't a taxable event because it went from one IRA to another. But nonetheless, you will get a 1099-R. The code in box 7 of that will show as a regular distribution. How you account for that in your tax return is what clears it up and ultimately makes it a non-taxable event if you do it all properly. So that's IRA to IRA. What if it's an employer plan? Again, 401k, 403b, federal thrift savings plan. If you're rolling one of those to an IRA. Now, whether you do it directly or indirectly, you will get a 1099-R for it. Unlike with IRAs where you won't get a 1099 if you roll it directly, you will always get a 1099 for rolling over your employer plan to your IRA, even if it is done directly. Same thing, you want to look in box 7 of the 1099-R. Box 7 has a whole host of codes that denote different things. If the custodian processed it correctly, your 401k custodian processed it correctly, box 7 should have a code of G as in Gary typically. That code means qualified rollover from one plan to another. So all's good. If the code in box 7 is number 7 or something else denoting it as a normal looking distribution, that's not cool. You got to get on the horn with your plan administrator and have them iron it out to say, no, this was in fact a direct rollover. Why'd you code it incorrectly? So again, you will get a 1099-R anytime you roll over an employer plan to an IRA. Now, what do you do with it? You do need to report that 1099-R. Let me step back. So what commonly happens with 401k rollovers, for example, is even if it is a direct rollover, they will send the check to you. So commonly the 401k will liquidate everything you have in the plan to cash. They then send you a check for all that cash. Now, here's the important thing. The check will not be made out to you. If you're doing a direct rollover, the check will not be made out to you. It'll be made out to the custodian of your IRA. You get the check, you turn around, you mail it, you overnight it, you whatever, to your custodian of your new IRA. That's still a direct rollover. Just because you took physical possession of the check doesn't make it indirect. The important thing is who's the check made out to. If it's made out to you, that's not good. That means they processed it as a direct distribution to you as opposed to a rollover. If the check's made out to your new IRA custodian, all's good. It's still a direct transfer. So point is, you'll get a 1099-R from your employer plan administrator showing the dollar amount of this rollover. Don't freak out. If they did code it correctly, if they did process the rollover correctly, it's not going to be taxable. But you do still need to report it on your tax return. So it's going to show a gross amount. Let's say it was a $500,000 401k you're rolling over. You're going to have a $500,000 gross distribution on your tax return, on your 1040. You do need to show a $500,000 gross distribution. But again, don't freak out. The important thing is right next to that column on your tax return will be the taxable distribution, which if it was coded and processed correctly, will be zero. So you're not going to owe tax on that rollover, but you do need to show the gross rollover. Why do you need to show if it's not taxable? Well, because the IRS has a computer system that scans and matches what's shown on your tax return versus what they're expecting to see based on all the 1099s and other tax docs they get. The IRS does get copies of all your 1099s, so it knows what to expect to look for on your tax return. To the extent what they want, what they expect to see in your tax return doesn't actually match what you put on your tax return, there's a really high chance that computer system would generate an automatic letter to you saying, hey, something's not right here. There's different, it's called the CP letter. There's different numbers associated with it. But the point is you may get some automated letter. Don't be scared. That just means, oh yeah, oops, I forgot to report my 401k rollover. You'll just have to amend your return, show it, and all should be good. But that's that. So don't be freaked out. Again, if and when you do get a 1099-R for your employer plan rollover, that's completely normal. You should get one. You should be concerned if you don't get one. As far as IRA rollovers, if you do it directly, no, you won't get a 1099. If you do it indirectly, you will. That still doesn't mean it's taxable. It all depends what you did with that money and whether or not you ultimately rolled it over to another IRA. So that's that. Hope you found this all helpful. I will see you next time. Take care.